in person coming up, like in the second half of the year?
Not yet.
Okay.
I know that there's some conferences floating around that I'm
Yeah.
gonna look at. Are
Okay.
you doing anything in person?
Doing that conference in like 2 weeks in Wisconsin. So that's one of my favorites.
Nice.
And Web Unleashed in Toronto in
Mm-hmm.
October. And
Okay.
I think that's it for now. What
Yeah.
were there? You said there were potential ones that you were thinking about?
Yeah. I don't know if you know Elian from the Astro
Yeah.
squad. I'm sure you've seen him around.
But
Yeah.
Elian just left Astro. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
He still talks about it. He still
Yeah.
uses it. It's
Yep.
been a recurring theme. Is that if you leave, you still love it, so it's
Yeah.
fine.
Obviously.
Yeah. But he's of course poking me about React Brussels in
Oh,
Belgium.
cool. Yeah.
Looks fun. CFP is this Friday, so I need to
Mm.
decide, I guess. I don't know. I feel wrong applying somewhere if I don't know for sure I would travel there, but
Yeah.
I don't have a reason not to. I don't
I think it's
think.
fair to just give
Why not?
yourself a chance. Yeah.
Give
I would
yourself a
be
chance.
so a couple of comments. Christian says I love Astro. Astro awesome. Adam says afternoon. Frank said in response to the title of this, nope, they fixed nothing. Same state as before, as it was
Sheesh.
named
Whew.
Done.js. I don't know. That's like coming in hot. I this will be a fun conversation. Fuzzy on Twitch. What's going on? What's going on? Yeah, I'd be curious. What would be like if you're applying for a React conference? What would your take be? Like, what kind of talk would
Yeah.
you pitch?
Yeah, and I'm trying to. I don't know if I'm switching course or focusing myself more because last year I went pretty deep on understanding frameworks outside of Astro, which
Hmm.
is really helpful as a
Absolutely.
API designer.
Yep.
So I accidentally became a
A
fan
React
favorite.
expert.
Yeah, I accidentally built a video that gets shared around a lot on a simple RSC implementation. That's
Hmm.
actually the name of the repository, simple RSC. And it has like tens of forks and
Yep.
one commit from Dan Abramov, which to me, that's like
Sick.
peak.
That's
If you
yeah.
have one commit, like,
That's the
whoa,
huge one. Yeah.
big deal. So yeah, I turned that into a conference talk, turned that into a YouTube video for anyone
Yep.
who didn't catch the
I
conference.
have seen that. Let me see if I can.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Keep going. I'll grab a link to that.
thanks. But that was the first long video I ever did because I thought it is something that you could live demo
Yep.
and actually implement to peek behind the curtain, show how it works. And now that I've done that and I really understand what the tech is doing, I take it back to Astro and think, is there anything we want to learn from here? Is Ben talking from the void? Do I sound bad?
I was just about to ask that.
Oh no. Let me check. I know my mic sometimes comes in quiet because I'm using like a nice microphone.
You sound perfect to me. I would be curious what the feedback is. Oh, it's the black background.
Oh, the
Okay.
black background.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm in a void. I always have a green screen with me, so this is my default. This is like a Tron background from 3
Yeah.
years ago, and I just kept it. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I was worried. I was like, audio sounds good to me.
Always the question, yeah.
I feel like Frank is going to be the hard one to please here. How to make React fast and fix it? Use ref and then custom elements API. You're done. Okay. I think this is
I
a
like it.
different conversation with other aspects, but
No,
yeah, go ahead.
I don't mind the convo. I think Astro attracts people who are frustrated with any JavaScript tooling at all and think, well, I mean, the web has components, the web has signals. Those are coming. I've been playing with an early proposal for that.
There's
The
a
web has
proposal
view
like
transitions.
built-in signals. I think I've
Yeah,
seen that.
very
Yeah.
early. I mean, it's
Okay.
a stage 2 proposal. I got to meet the team that's working on it. Like the actual TC39 group happened to speak in Finland when I was there because they
Cool.
also held the TC39 event.
Okay.
So this like very stuffy sounding acronym, suddenly it's actual people that are just
Nice.
very cool and just want this tech we've been building to just be on the window object, you know? Just have it there.
Yeah.
So I joined the Discord. I found their polyfill, which is just a rough implementation of what signals might look like, they could completely change it. But it's so simple in what it does. You have a state and you have an effect. Those are the two things that you have. Same way you have it in Vue or Solid or Svelte. It's just taking those and making it something available to anyone. So even if it changes, I'm very comfortable talking about it because we've all kind of agreed. Like, even if this isn't in the browser, it could be a 500 byte library that you just throw on something. And now the web's reactive. You didn't need React. There you go.
I love that. That'll be super cool. Window signals observable AI.
Window AI is that one.
Wait, is that a real thing?
Chrome did put out something, and then it wasn't in an experimental release. It's weird. But yeah, Chrome put out a window.ai that used their Gemini local model or something. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I would think, okay, if I use window.ai, I'm in Firefox. Will they ever adopt an AI model? And who owns the AI model?
Yeah.
And Apple would never use Gemini, so what's that going to be when I'm on a phone? That's what I'm worried about there, is just browsers choosing to do AI differently. Like, my entire app tells you random facts that aren't true if you're in Safari. Like, that's such a weird bug, but it could be. I don't know.
Adam also mentioned, Adam Matheson mentioned Studio CMS.
Yeah.
Is that I actually don't know about that. What is Studio CMS?
Yeah. Oh, Astro CMS. He's building an Astro CMS that's using our database primitive.
Oh, cool. So he is specifically building that himself.
He's building it himself.
Is Adam part of Astro team, or this is like on his own outside of Astro team?
Right. Outside of Astro team. I don't want to get whether he's a maintainer wrong. He might be. I need to check the Discord roles. But you end up with this situation, Astro Discord, where if I just talk to you a lot, I assume you're a maintainer just because you're active.
Yeah,
so,
he's a support patrol, maybe. He said.
Support patrol.
Cool.
Nice.
Sweet. That's super cool. I actually hadn't seen that. For reference, anybody that's interested, this is the link to Astro Studio CMS.
Yes.
That's cool. Well, so there's a couple different things. There's server actions. There's the idea of Suspense. There's also server islands. And I wanted to talk a little bit about view transitions as well. Do you have any of those that you want to start with?
Oh, man, I don't know. I think server islands is a fun place to start, since we, an hour ago, got to showcase a website that you can go to see what it does. So I might as well just share that.
Yeah, send the link to that.
Can I join that? Oh, I have to connect to my YouTube.
If you send me the link on Discord and I'll copy it over.
No problem, yeah. Part of me just wants to connect. Can I just do it without a double login? Allow. Maybe. It worked. All right, cool.
Love it. Fuzzy said Astro community is fire. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, it sure is.
So server.
Okay. There it is. We've got the URL.
I'll grab that for Fuzzy said BRB dinner.
He's casually rattling off how amazing Astro is. Don't worry, I can hold down the fort, Fuzzy. I can send fire emojis. You're not the only one who can do that. I can send fire.
Nick just joined. Arkhard joined. Jobby Coder just joined. What's up, y'all? Kind of late, but couldn't resist Astro fun. Absolutely. There's anything that would get me to commit, it would be Astro. Actually, let me just let's do this. Let me share this screen so people can see. Share the screen, yes. And I think the key thing here, if I refreshed, is like the loading states in different places and how those get completed eventually. But what's the general intro to server islands? And this is in comparison to server components and streaming, but I think most directly comparable to partial pre-rendering in Next.js, which is an experimental phase now that I just learned about with Lee yesterday on stream. I think that's the most direct comparison, I think.
That is the direct comparison. Cool. We actually mention at the bottom left partial pre-rendering.
Inspired by it. Very cool. Yeah.
Inspired
Okay.
by.
Awesome.
Yes, remixed, made better. I don't know, but yeah, it's very similar. The goal is to mix your static and your dynamic together in perfect harmony, because we love the vision that was originally from Gatsby, where you want to generate everything statically, take your e-commerce catalog, turn it into a bunch of product pages, and it works really well until you need the user sign-in at the top that dynamically chooses your user based on a session or something like that. The product info is publicly available, but some of the customization, the upsell banner that might vary depending on a user, all sorts of things like that. Recommendations depending on your login, as we're seeing with this hotel widget. You want those to be loaded a little bit later. So the publicly available info, like here's a trip that we offer, we want Google to index that super quickly. That appears right away, statically rendered based on a catalog of some sort. And then when we want to give you some personalization, depending on who you are, your source, if you came from like an Instagram ad, maybe we change what we show on the page. All of that is something that you kick off to a dynamic island, or a server island as we're calling it. So implementation wise, you're still writing everything as Astro components, but now you can choose when an Astro component's going to run, whether it's going to be statically or with a server. And that's everything you have to do.
Server defer is the tag in this case that we use. And in the Astro sense, the dynamic parts here, I actually want to, so Frank is going a very negative route in the comment section, but I think has a reasonable point of let's actually inspect this and see it. But what I expect to see is from kind of the static asset that gets sent to us. It's coming from a CDN. These dynamic parts have some sort of like built-in JavaScript like bundle that knows where to fetch the data and how to replace that data inside of the markup. Is that right?
Exactly. You can think of it the same way you would a fetch call. If you just wanted to implement this DIY, you would probably put a script tag. You would take like this widget here with summer offer. Maybe you would make a standalone route called summeroffer.astro. And it would take some query params with the user object, and then it would spit out this little block as HTML. We're doing all of this for you, but if you implemented it, that's what you would do. You would create a separate endpoint that returns this chunk of component. And then on the client, you would do a fetch call for that HTML. You would find the element on the page where it's supposed to go, and then you would hot swap that loading skeleton with the new state.
That idea, I don't exactly know how partial pre-rendering does that. Does it make the fetch request from the client to the server to get that markup?
Yeah, I'm not sure how they divvy it up. I know from implementing Suspense, at least, that they do ship a little bit of, well, not a little bit, the entire React runtime to do this. But React is,
Well, because that's a thing. Well, like the server component aspect of React is part of React. Like the thing that can handle reconciliation of like stream data coming in from server components.
Right. Instead of shipping just HTML and then having fetch calls, they are streaming everything as one big stream of React objects. And they'll smartly use the React DOM to put all the components in the right place. So instead of Astro, which starts with nothing on the client and then adds fetch calls, React always has someone in the client. They always have the bundle that is fetching everything from the server and putting it on there. So it's a little bit different in that way, where it's one stream of information versus initial document, fetch.
Fetch, yeah. Which the fetch is much easier, I think, just to understand. Because it's not that different. Like it's not that different from the way a SPA would work of like, I need data, I make a request. The difference here, and Fuzzy's relating this to HTMX, which I think is perfect, is like instead of making a request for data, we're making a request for markup. And I remember the release of partials in Astro started to allow us to do that. Specifically, I think mainly people kind of looked at that with HTMX, where HTMX could handle button clicks kind of automatically with directives or form submissions. and you would tell it where to go make the request to get a partial back, and then it would render that in a spot. So you've got some sort of very minimal JavaScript that tells it where to make the fetch request and how to replace it, similar to how HTMX works.
Exactly. HTMX is the more manual version of that, where you need to break out each component as like an endpoint. So you would have your separate endpoint that returns a partial of HTML, and then you would have some markup that says, go fetch this. Here is a CSS selector to choose the element and put it there. Right. Astro is taking away that manual setup. First off, you can just put these components anywhere, like a components folder. You don't have to register a route. We just do that. And it'll also handle the hot swapping for you. So it knows this component has a fallback, replace fallback, since that's what you intended.
Yep. I love it. So if we were to look inside of here, what we would see if we look inside of the console and the network tab.
Yeah.
And filtered on JavaScript just to start, we would see like a couple of these add to cart is like an individual one.
Yeah, and I'm betting we intersperse components and other things as well.
Okay.
I think.
So it may not be.
Perhaps it would be core code. So it might be the index file. It might be the client file. Yep. Okay. We put React on this. Okay. Okay. We're bridging the divide here. Gotcha. You can do whatever you want.
Yep.
It may be helpful to do the fetch in XHR to see what requests are being made, but there would be
what I meant to do. Sorry, that's exactly what I meant to do. That's exactly what we should be doing.
Yeah, I was curious if we could find the fetcher. I don't know what that looks like.
This was what I meant though. Is we can see these are like individual components that we're requesting through AJAX requests.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they are named. They're not like hash codes of a random build artifact. Here's a component. It's right there.
Yep. And you can see like this is just markup that gets sent back.
Yeah.
So the things that Astro are doing for you is with this annotation, it's kind of converting those components into API endpoints.
Yep.
That you can. I wonder what the full, because surely you have to like prefix that URL in some way. Like so you have it under server islands. So underscore server islands and then component name. Because I was thinking like there is a chance you might have your own API route under API /
Oh yeah.
I mean the naming convention probably doesn't match up, but like you've got them suffixed or prefixed under underscore server islands.
Yes. And for actions, we do something kind of similar. That's our other setup to just do an arbitrary endpoint and we generate it for you. So that's an underscore actions. And kind of a side effect, since pages, if you use an underscore, it ignores the route. That means underscores are fair game for us. So we can name it something that's human readable.
Wonder what, did I say card count? No, I said that right, I think.
Yeah, I think you did.
Should that be able to?
Let me think. I mean, if you go back, it would give more details on whether it was a post and whether it accepts some sort of information.
Yeah.
May have a middleware for the user.
It is a post. And then with payload. So if we had passed any props to that component, they would be in the static markup and then get attached, or they would just be in the annotation for this thing in the original markup and then included in the request going out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Cool. But if we were to imitate this exact same request, we would get just the markup coming back.
Yeah. You might be able to copy as curl and just go crazy.
Where is that, like on here?
I'm trying to remember where I've seen that. I think if you right click on payload, the tab, I'm not sure.
Copy object, expand.
Okay. If you right click on the tab itself, did that give us
like here?
Oh, it just doesn't. I know I've seen copy as curl before. Maybe it's in preview or headers. It's somewhere.
Yeah.
But
I actually haven't tried it. That's interesting. As I like lower this thing down. Okay. But super cool. And again, that just seems like it's so simple to follow, but yet so powerful. And the big okay, let's do this question here for Michael first, then I'll come back to something. Michael asks, if I have a sensitive function that I don't want to share, I place it in a component, then the function won't be accessible by the client, only the function outputs. I guess he's specifically saying if I have, this is, So you have basically like server-side code that needs to make a database query that references like a API key or something, or a database key. In regular Astro without this, we by default, all the code is run at like inside of a component. All that code is run at build time.
Sure. So that's fine.
Statically. We can also do SSR, which all that code is only run on the server at runtime.
Yep.
The only code that's ever run in the browser is when you incorporate, like if you do a manual script tag or you add React or a framework to Astro. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
So,
okay.
To at least answer the sensitive part, you might mean if you have an authentication gateway and you don't want this to be some publicly accessible endpoint on the internet. Like, I don't want some malicious actor to go to server island /card count and they're able to access my database and ping it 1 million times. Like, you do want to treat the components like they are endpoints. It's actually kind of cool. You can set cache headers for these components. So if you like refresh the page, individual components get their own cache headers because they're just endpoints. So you have access to everything you would on a regular page. So you could also add the authentication check. You can also add middleware that will run for all of those requests. So you might block certain IPs or other things. So all of that's fair game, but you do need to know these components are going to run on the server, so I can't just query my database with sensitive info, no matter what prop you give me. I probably want to gate it with an auth check or accept some other parameters. And for the props specifically, we're also adding encryption. So if you send properties from the static build into these server components, those things that are on that post request you're looking at right there with the props and the slots, when you're passing a prop, it'll be encrypted by a private key inside of your Astro project. So you can't just look at the post request and see, oh, they sent the user's name in plain text. Well, let me just write that down. It'll actually be encrypted. So you can safely send more sensitive info to these backend endpoints. And then it'll decrypt based on that known key.
So that means that the secret key has to live like on my deployment server.
Right. Yeah, and we're still looking at implementation. Next.js has something just like this. If you use their actions feature, they include a private actions key inside of their manifest file. So that gets built. Every time you build the project, a new key gets generated. And that's used to keep everything safe.
Basically an environment variable, but just stored in a file that we never see because it's on the server.
Yes. And you can also override it with an environment variable. So I could see that also being implemented here in a very similar way.
Interesting. Adam was asking what type of encryption. Any idea if you know that right offhand?
It's not implemented, so no.
Yeah.
I did start prototyping something, literally looking through the Next.js implementation, because I don't know encryption strategies. I do now, but I'm trying to remember. Let me see. It was like AEMJG. How does encryption work? I'm the wrong one to ask.
Yeah, fair enough.
I guess it's a well-known algorithm, but I'm forgetting.
Yep. Nick said clear text. Yes.
Clear text, exactly.
That's 100% it.
Yeah, just base 64, just pancake, you're done.
Yeah.
No problem.
I did want to make, like, this has been kind of an epiphany for me, and it was actually Fred's keynote that I actually just watched. Like, I just paired up YouTube to my TV in my kitchen just to kind of test it out, and then it auto-played into his keynote from the conference or meetup or whatever in Montreal a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And something really clicked for me with this idea of server islands. And I'll go back to the Next.js world and server components. server components seem really cool, and they are. But server components seem really cool because you get this benefit of like I can send back markup and then stream in updates. So that time to first byte is going to be quick in theory. When you start to compare that versus a truly static page, there's actually a pretty big difference because a truly static page is going to be served from a CDN, which is replicated in nodes all across the world.
Yeah.
Versus when you do like a regular server-side rendering, even if you are actually using server components, what that does, no matter where you are in the world, it's making the request all the way to wherever that server is deployed, which by default in most places is US East 1, which is totally different than having these replicated nodes on a CDN. So what they will get to or have experimental, and I guess you're in an experimental phase right now with, or some sort of tag with this as well. Both of those options are going to give the ability to serve that thing initially statically from a CDN, which is a significant upgrade. And then still, however they do it, and then how you do it with fetch request, go out and get the dynamic data that's based on user stuff or like whatever it is.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Sweet. And it's so simple. We just haven't, I don't know. I think there was a really big attraction to, can we progressively enhance everything? Can we make it work with zero JavaScript for every last use case? Yeah. And then it was like, well, you're just banging your head against the wall for months trying to get out of order streaming to work without JavaScript. What if you just added a fetch call and shipped it? Like, that's kind of fine. And that's exactly what happened when Matt proposed this. Yeah. Matt is an engineer that was at LFI, now at Astro. And when he put out the proposal, it was like, oh, yeah, that's simple. Why didn't we do that? That's a good idea. Yeah. and then it just came to be. So if you accept a little bit of JavaScript to make everything stitch together, the static and then the dynamic request, it's very easy to just put the pieces together.
That's so cool. Especially like easy from a developer perspective of using it by literally just having the annotation of like server defer. What did we say it was?
Server : defer.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's an experimental flag. You can try it. It's very, very simple.
Yeah. Nick said that he learned a lot from him when we worked together at Netlify. Love that. Christophe said, bonsoir tout le monde. Fun fact, I spoke in Paris at .js, and I did a recording with PodRocket, the Log Rocket podcast today. Yeah. And one of the first things he asked me was he watched my talk at .js, and he was like, wait, do you really speak French? Because I like greeted everyone and said a follow-up sentence in French. And I was like, I really appreciate that. No, I don't, but I practiced that so that like I could try to use my French. And anyway, so Christophe has been one of my friends that speaks French and Spanish, which I'm a big language nerd. So he's been kind and entertaining me when I want to try to speak different languages. So
nice. Yep. It doesn't take much to convince people.
Yeah.
I didn't even do that in Finland because the Finnish language is known for being the hardest language to learn.
And totally, like I have a good background in Spanish, which makes learning French easier. It makes recognizing or learning Italian easier. I haven't done that yet. We're planning on going. So our 9-year anniversary is October. We're planning for our 10-year to do a big Italy trip. So hopefully we do that.
We're in Italy.
Yeah. Everywhere. Like that's basically it.
Very doable.
Yeah.
Yep. I have a friend who backpacked into he does nomading in tech. So
sick. I love that.
Yeah. It's very cool. So cool. He'll be back in Florence for a few months. Now that he's explored, Florence is apparently just a great place for that.
Yeah. So. Love that. Christophe asked if I practice in Paris. I practice every chance I get. I try to speak as much French as I can, which is not a ton. And almost every time people respond to me back in English because it's easier to do it that way. But actually more people did respond to me in French in Paris this time than the previous time. So maybe that's a testament to me getting a little bit better. Who knows?
Maybe.
Cool. So that, I mean, like that's really it with like, I don't want to undersell how big of a deal it is, but like from a talking about it standpoint, it's like, it is relatively simple. And for me, in comparison to other things, like relatively simple to understand as well.
Exactly. I think part of Astro's problem is there's not much to talk about, and we just got to force people to talk about it more. Who cares? Just repeat the rerun. Show people you can put a script tag on the page again. That's still cool.
That's still so what sort of magic happens for you to be able to add a script tag in Astro, like a vanilla JavaScript script tag, and inside of there be able to do imports just work that way? Like, so there's two things that it showed: doing imports and doing TypeScript.
Yeah.
And that's wild. Can you just make an import call from the browser now?
Yeah, you've been able to do that much, but you can't do, well, this has changed recently. You couldn't do like an npm import where it's just the name of a package and you go. Now there's something called import maps where you can put a JSON file in a script tag in the browser. It's kind of wonky, but you tell the browser every time I say jQuery, I don't know, colon, the actual CDN path to HTTPS jQuery 3.7.0. So the browser knows, okay, every time I see the jQuery import, I'm going to hot swap with the CMS import or the relative path in your bundle or whatever.
CDN?
Yeah, wherever it is.
Okay.
And Vite does that in development to keep things fast. So everything is like an unbundled import in the browser. So whenever you update a file, it doesn't have to rebundle anything. It's just available.
Okay.
In production, we do bundle everything, or Vite does, I should say. So when you're doing that in Astro and you just have a script tag, we are being smart about it. We're taking the TypeScript, turning it into JavaScript. We're taking the NPM packages and bundling them smartly. And then we turn it into a script in your head tag. So instead of it being somewhere random on the page, it's in the head so that it mounts at the right time. So we do optimize what you wrote. You can opt out of that with is inline. I don't know if you've tried that before, but that would like opt out of that behavior.
Okay.
And that would just be like a browser script, and it's up to you to do everything.
Okay.
So we do a little bit of both.
Cool. Love it. Got a comment in French from Northern Chimp. Ce direct est très intéressant et instructif. Merci. I assume direct is like this conversation, this stream is very interesting and instructive. That's awesome. I love it. And I appreciate that.
I believe that.
I believe it. I buy it.
Right.
Hijabi said, question, not sure if I'm missing something, but I fetch data in the front matter and it does not auto refresh the request. It's in server mode, no UI frameworks yet, has the adapter in. One thing that I'm missing there, I think, Hijabi, I don't know of a way for you to like fetch in the front matter specifically. Like front matter is just kind of static data, right? So I don't know
if you're in static mode. Yeah, I know it is painful as heck to debug a problem through a YouTube comment section. If you want to go to astro.build/chat, you can get. There's literally support patrol people here, so they'll find it if you have a sample. Whatever you're doing, it sounds like it can work. If you want to fetch data on every request and do a fetch call in the front matter, that should totally work. So it could be something with how you configured. If
you have server mode and I just don't know where, like the hook to fetch the data would have to be, like you can't make a fetch request like in just front matter itself.
Oh, why not?
In front, like how, like what?
Well, like in an Astro front matter block. Yeah. Is that what you mean?
Wait, oh, never mind. I'm thinking front matter in like a markdown file.
Fair. Yeah.
Okay. I gotcha.
It's bitten us for a long time calling it server front matter or whatever.
Yeah.
People are just like, dude, come up with a different name.
Like,
it's our thing.
Yeah. I never refer to it that way. So that completely threw me off. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The fences. Fair enough. I get it now. So yeah, I double checked that you have the server configuration enabled. You could do a log on the server to see if like when you make that request, is it hitting it? And then if you have code snippets to share either where you mentioned or like in the Learn Build Teach Discord, happy to help with that because I feel much more prepared to answer this question now that I know we're talking about like
now that we got
the
our
JavaScript in an Astro file. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. I tried to
Um,
fetch in my markdown, and it's just
well,
not
that
working,
you were
man.
like, yeah, you can do that. And I was like, how the hell? Like,
That's
that's not
wild.
a thing. Okay.
I think 11 you could
Um,
do it because it's crazy, but
all right. Let's talk about actions.
ooh,
So actions are the idea that basically in a single page application framework, what we've always done is we had JavaScript that ran in the browser. We did some sort of thing. That thing would make a request, fetch a request to the backend. So you had all these API endpoints
yep,
to serve back JSON most likely. And so front end makes a request to the back end responds back. The idea of actions is to abstract all that away from you and you just make a function call. So you have a function that runs specifically on the server, but you seem to call that function from the front end
yep.
and the framework takes care of the rest. Is that a fair, like, high level of the idea concept of actions?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's cutting out the boilerplate part
Cool.
of setting up an endpoint.
Cool. A lot of times we think of that, or at least I do. I think of this from like a forms perspective. And the common scenario that I see, and I go back to Next.js just because, like, I think they're one of the most popular frameworks right now and pushing stuff along the way. And I'll come back to how Astro fits into that from my perspective in a second. And Christoph is asking the same concept that Next.js actually. Yeah. So I started with the concept of actions as a whole that will apply to both Next.js, Astro, and anyone else that uses it. We think about this from a form perspective. One of the things we always do in all the examples for actions, every single one that I see outside of Astro, is we send over this form data. We define our action that accepts form data. We grab every individual property that we need. We then validate it with Zod. And we do that every single time in every single demo. So tell me what actions looks like in the Astro sense and how does it change that?
Yeah. The classic object.fromEntries, formData.entries, if you're in
Yep.
that before.
I actually just
it's
wrote
my
that
favorite
today and I asked if there was any reason not to. Apparently there's potential
are
with like
reasons.
duplicates. Like if you, and I didn't,
that's true.
I didn't understand that, or I didn't know that. So anyway, but yes, absolutely. So you're getting all the form data either individually or using object dot from entries of form data dot entries or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what you're talking about. And there are a few gotchas when you do that that we smooth over. So someone asked in the chat, is it just Next.js actions? The primitive that Next.js does, or it's really React, I guess. Server actions are a moving target of where it's implemented, but you could call it React server actions if you want.
People, I think it makes more sense now to refer to it in the React ecosystem, but early on, I was like Next.js actions, and people were like, it's React. I was like, I don't care. Like the only way that people use this is through Next.js. So we have to understand that like perspective carries a lot of weight. Now there's other frameworks that are doing more server components and blah, blah, blah. But especially at the time, it was like, this is the only place that people are doing this. So Next.js actions, but whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. So the sauce that we bring to the table is filling in all the gaps of just a very basic action primitive. Because at its core, an action is just a type safe function that takes in data and then it returns stuff. Thank you for the visual.
Yeah.
But Astro noticed there are a lot of things that you do when you accept form data specifically, but even JSON, because when you take input from any source, you can't trust that it's going to be the type of input that you defined with TypeScript. Like you could, with the React server action, say that it takes in a name, which is a string. But then if I send you potato, you don't have any type guards to make sure that it's name. You wouldn't catch that there was an error. You just get a weird runtime exception saying could not parse potato of undefined. I don't know, or name of undefined. But since we're using Zod here, this is a runtime check. So before you get to the handler code, and you can see the anatomy here, you say what you accept, which is JSON by default or form data if you opt in. Then the input, which is going to validate the object that's coming through. Once all of that checks out. Yeah, exactly. When that checks out, then you get to your handler, which is the Next.js action piece, the actual type safe values. And you can return whatever you want, and you get that type safe result on the other side. So one of a couple pieces that we add is the input validation. And you can see it does a few smart things. First, you can validate strings or strings. You can also check if they're a specific type of string, like an email.
Yep.
And you can even check for non-strings. That's where object from entries falls apart sometimes, especially for numbers, because you might think it was input number. So I'm going to get a number. And you don't.
Nope.
You get a string because you did object from entries. So we massage that part for you. And we say, okay, you're expecting a Boolean. We'll check that it's present instead of looking for a string. You're expecting a number. We'll try to parse it as a number first. And if it fails, then we'll throw a validation error. So we handle those cases where you're taking the HTML input, which is type number, type email, type whatever, and trying to map that back to your server. And we have all the pieces there, just using Zod and our own form data massaging to make it match the Zod object.
Yep. It just, I told you I'd kind of come back to how Astro to me fits into this world, because I talked about like Next.js being the first ones to really kind of make actions mainstream for me. First one to make like the idea of server components and streaming like mainstream for me, even though Astro had streaming, although in order streaming for a while. Yeah. But the thing that I rave about every time with Astro is as soon as you add something, I know it's going to be the best developer experience for that thing ever. And this is an example of that. 100%. I say this all the time, which all the examples in Next.js show this same idea of validation and Zod schema.
Yeah.
And this, like, you've just got it. And I think there's a balance maybe. I think React as an ecosystem and probably Next.js follows a little bit suit of like, we're going to give you the ability to handle things however you want. Yeah. I think Astro gets a little more opinionated and says, you're going to have this thing all the time. Here's a good way to handle that. And I like what Astro provides when it adds features like this.
Yeah, it is two different approaches. Next.js and React both leave holes that are like, it's like an episode of Dora where they ask you a question and the answer is so obvious, but they make you say it. They make the library authors say it and make the library. Astro's like, you know what Dora's going to say. We're just going to implement this because we know all the examples have Zod. Let's just have a nice baseline and just do it. The same way like Markdown parsing. We could have let the community figure out how do you parse a bunch of Markdown and just give you glob. But our website says content site on it, which means we should probably do more than that. We're a little bit more focused on the types of people we want to talk to. So we tend to have more opinions because that's also, in a market of competing ideas, some want to have full-on integration. Some people want more things bundled in, and you need both. So I feel like Astro is that kind of foil to what Next.js does, where we're the more bundled option. Still very open. We are very, very slow and methodical about having opinions in the first place. We wait for people to beat down our doors asking for something before we do it. Like view transitions, there were questions about SPA mode for 2 years before we did it. But we did it at the right time to match up with what Chrome's doing, and it paid off, I think.
And now,
actions, we waited for everyone to play their hand. Because I tried SvelteKit, Solid Start, Next, React, Next. I was like, okay, everyone's played their hand. We can pull the best ideas from all of them and do it.
I love that. The idea of playing your hand. It's like playing last in poker. You know what everyone else has at that point.
Exactly. I like it. Same thing.
Yeah. So with actions, form actions specifically, typically the idea of progressive enhancement comes up. And this is something I've been spending the last few days looking at in Next.js and seeing if how often with what they advertise can I just turn off JavaScript and it work. And by default, what happens? Well, actually, it'd be, I guess so one of the things I think I figured out that doesn't work is if I call an action like this inside of an onSubmit function, it didn't work.
Sure.
But if you pass in the action as a property to the form directly, progressive enhancement does work.
Yes, exactly. I can tell you why.
Yeah,
If you're
please.
at all curious.
Please do.
Because we did implement Astro actions to support React actions. So like in React, you can say action equals and pass it a function now.
Yep.
It was splunking through source code in React to figure out what does this thing do, and figured out what the progressive behavior is.
I think I might know what this is. Keep going.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's so as you mentioned, progressive enhancement only works if you just pass the action, but not if you define a function in line or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's because when you just pass an action, it has this metadata property on it that I can even type in chat. It's this crazy object that gets put onto the function that React secretly looks for. So this is something that we also put in Astro core just to appease React, basically, to make sure, hey, every time you see $ form action as like an object property on the function, that's your progressive enhancement behavior. Go use it. But as soon as you define a function in line, there's no more $ form action. You just made a new function that defines some new behavior. So because you did that, we don't have any progressive enhancement info anymore, because you just defined what the function handler is in line. There's no way for the server to map it back anymore. So the only way to get progressive enhancement is to pass the action directly. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I think so. The other thing that's really interesting is if you use action, they do progressive enhancement by default by waiting for JavaScript to load and then send it. So they actually queue up the requests, the form submissions, and wait for hydration to finish. So I guess there's two different ideas of progressive enhancement. There's no JavaScript, and then there's JavaScript is taking so long to load that we want to let them submit the form before it finishes loading. Yeah. And so in that sense, and I actually am not sure when that takes over, but you can see if you're loading, if you turn your thing onto like slow 3G or whatever, and you submit a form and you click 5 times and then you log out all your requests on the back end, you'll see 5 requests after like 20 seconds after that full hydration code is loaded, which is really interesting.
That's really interesting.
And I feel like
I heard about this. Yeah.
It's an interesting take because I feel like that's not ideal. Like I would rather it just do the regular form submit.
Yeah.
Like, and I guess that's what I thought would be more of the thing is just like do the form submit to the route that you're on. But I guess the route for the action would be different than the route that you're on by default.
Yeah, there's some nuance there because they're thinking, okay, if we just did the form submit, it would talk to the server faster since we didn't queue it. We just did it. We just did the form submit.
Yep.
But the user would see a big old refresh as React remounts the universe to show you success. And they're like, well, to handle updates, it would be better to wait for React to load, because then as soon as the form submission goes through, we don't have to reload the page. It's just going to update the thing how you intended. So in React's case, I think it's the right default, but I agree it does slow down how quickly I can talk to the server.
Well, and I guess my thing is like, then all of a sudden you have this like rage click thing where you have 10 form submits because people just bang the button. That would be,
I wasn't thinking of that.
That would be my big question. Yeah.
I don't know how that's handled.
How would you handle showing validation errors with what's here?
Ooh, yeah. We have thought about this.
Yeah.
And we don't have a demo here, but we do have an example in our RFC for this. So we got first class everything. Don't worry. But,
not surprised.
Oh, yeah. But there's this other aspect of form actions that is the action error object, because another issue with Next.js server actions is if you ever have an error, you need to set the status code to like 403 forbidden from this action result. If you just kind of hold it the way it feels like you should hold it, you're probably going to return JSON that says error : user not allowed or something like that. And when you do that, it works in your code, but you still, if you're looking at your server logs, if you're looking at your dev server, you see status code 200 for everything. Even if it failed, everything's 200, 200, 200 because you're always returning JSON.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem that GraphQL has had forever, where everything's failed successfully.
Right.
It's fine.
Because it has a dot error property or whatever in the JSON that comes back.
Yeah. And you could do that with actions as well. But we sort of stole from, and this is where custom errors, I guess I'm talking about custom errors before I talk about validation errors. It's hard to decide when things should be introduced. Let's just jump to validation errors since we're talking about it. But yeah, you can see there, if you ever have Zod raise a validation error, you might want to turn those into actual error banners in your form. So we set up the error object that you can get from any action, and that will either have like a random status code like 403 forbidden if you threw that, or it would have the specific Zod object, and that's what is input error lets you check for.
Okay.
This is a more convoluted example since we have React state. We have to update a state variable with the input error. This is one of many ways that you could go about it. But the simple case is you take the error object, you check that it's an input error, and then that gives you this fields property, which has all the errors broken down by each field in the form. So if you wanted an error banner for the body, you would say error.fields.body. And that would have the string. If you had another error, it would be error.fields.whatever. It's a type safe object. You actually get autocomplete for fields.body because it's a form that accepts body. So yeah, why not demo it? We'll see how this goes.
I'll show you some stuff I was working on in React. We're going to do a video on like a few different ways to do this sort of thing.
Oh, for sure.
One of the things that I have is utils that takes the Zod error and then returns back a string map, which is the name of the input and the message, which is exactly what you're returning there.
Yeah.
Right? Basically,
if you check
like
Astro
the fields.
You might find that.
Okay, cool. So like I'm doing something. And then the other thing that I will say I think is done really well, because I've gotten a lot of power out of it, is it's called use form state here. In React, they've changed this to use action state, I believe.
Yep.
And this is going to stay use form state because I think Next.js already made it one of their things. But you can then get back. So you get back an action that you set to your action. Then you get back to server state. And server state can be very, very powerful because on my server state, I should type this a little bit differently and not just make everything optional, but I have errors, which is that string map. I have a success message. I have data, which is basically the idea of the previous form, or like the form data itself. And I'll say why in a second. And I could type this with T and blah, blah, blah. Haven't done a whole lot of that. And then also have keep track of blurs, which I'll talk about in a second. But from each one of those actions, I return that server state. And then from that, I can do my success messages, and I can do anything else with errors. So if you look in here, I'll have server state dot data dot name as a default value. So like if for progressive enhancement, I'll take the server state as the default value for that input, if that makes sense. And then show if I have server state errors name, then I'll show that that error message as well.
Interesting.
So I found this idea of like maintaining and leveraging that server state that I define that has like some version of these properties. Pretty powerful, especially when looking at doing progressive enhancement and having this stuff work fully offline.
Yeah. And I did share in the chat as well. We have a little snippet in our blog talking about React 19, since we do support use action state. And we also do let you get that state from the server to do the same kind of thing.
Okay.
It is a little. Oh no, I shared it in the. I shared it in the comments for the YouTube. Sorry.
Yeah, I can't copy and paste it from there, unfortunately.
Oh, for
which
real?
sucks. Yeah.
From
where so I don't have YouTube open, like from the chat window inside of where we are.
I see what you.
Which is totally cool. This should be So I'll put this in the link for people on Twitch. Nick's got to go for a meeting. Great stuff. Yeah. See you, Nick. Appreciate you stopping by. So with that, by the way, one of the mind blowing things to me is that you're doing an Astro action inside of a React component.
Sure.
Like maybe it's not complicated to do, but that blows my mind that you're getting the benefit of what like you've created, and then I can just use that inside of React.
Yeah. The React 19 part was the hard part for sure, because we support React 19 progressive enhancement. You can pass an Astro action to use action state. You can use state across the wire. All of that was a lot to figure out. But looking towards the future, I think it makes a lot of sense. And yeah, it is crazy playing with actions in like a web component or just like a script tag with jQuery. Like it works totally fine. It's just a fetch call. So you can throw it in anywhere you want to. You can even put them in Astro front matter. That was something people asked for, is can I just use an action as like a utility function on the server and just have it be like a function call? And yeah, why not? So now you can also do it inside of Astro front matter if you wanted to like say actions.sign out or something. Like, yeah.
Does that translate to making a fetch request?
No, that's just going to be a function call because we know you're on the server.
Right.
We're smart enough
check to see if you're already there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. That's cool. What does the get action props do? Does that pass down like validation?
Yes.
Or no, actually, I have no idea what that does.
This is going away, so you won't have to ask this. This is the progressive enhancement piece. So what we're showing here is a very generic example that you could bring to Vue or Svelte or anywhere to have like the client update and the server fallback. So the client update is on submit, I want to do something. That's what you're seeing there. But if this form post gets to the server, JavaScript's not loaded, you're offline, as you were mentioning, we need some way to tell the server, they just posted a form, and it needs to go to this action. So get action props there is telling the server, this form post should go to the newsletter action. And then the server can pick up that hidden input right there that says
that's a hidden input. Okay.
Yes, I forgot to say hidden.
Yep. Yeah. Gotcha.
But we are changing that strategy now. Instead of using a hidden input, we're looking at a query param version. So as a user, instead of saying this crazy get action props thing, you would actually say form action equals actions.newsletter. And that would stringify to the fallback. So you don't have to do a hidden input dance anymore. You can actually say action equals action in any framework, and it'll work.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's still kind of blowing my mind. And again, it may be way simpler than I think it is, but the idea of mixing in Astro actions are used as a React action. Because all the things that I just said that I liked with like use action state or use action state versus I just showed use form state. I could have the exact same workflow inside of Astro.
Yes, you can.
Cool.
Yeah. And I don't blame you. It is complex. Looking at how many different ways you could submit a form. Astro supports every component framework, including just a server form. So it's like, you can't just be a novice in React. You have to be an expert in forms.
Yeah.
So it's been a learning journey.
I bet. Yeah. I'm so excited about, all the things that y'all do, to be honest. Like it just, every time I see a new feature, I just know that thing is going to be, from a developer experience perspective, like really, really good. And I guess that's one of the good things about being younger and not having some of the features yet, is you get to be really intentional about how you develop those features and let everyone kind of play their cards and then pick and choose what you think works to do. Yeah.
Yeah. We've been a little lucky that we didn't have to ride waves of hype. Like we didn't think, oh God, they put out server actions. If we don't put it out in 2 months, we're irrelevant.
Yeah.
No, we just do different stuff. So we're just going to put it out when it makes sense.
And you're not rushed by it. I love it. Cooked by Ben, baked with love. Yeah, I feel like you've been at least one of the primary people of just like trying to build some shit and learn and see what it's like, and then bring into, it seems like, the team to say like, hey, here's actually what we might want to do, and then as a team like build it. But you've been doing so much, and we didn't even talk about like your out of order streaming and your another form plugin thing that you built. So we didn't talk about that, but your like experimentation, I imagine, Ben bringing that in-house to the team is kind of what he's referring to.
Yeah, building a little form library definitely was an R&D experience, as Fuzzy mentioned.
Yeah.
I feel like now that we have actions in Astro, I might just turn, because it was a simple stack repository, and now I've
Hmm.
realized it's just Ben Labs where I'm just
Yeah.
playing with stuff.
Yeah.
So those
I like that.
packages, they're pre 1.0. We played with an idea. Now we found a natural thing in Astro, so maybe we can just deprecate that experiment
Yeah.
since now it's just here. Same with streaming. Now that we have server islands, which I'll be honest, Matt from Netlify, he knew exactly what it should look like coming in.
Yeah.
So, I shared what I did with Simple Stream. And then I was like, if you want to throw it all away, that's probably a good idea. Because
Probably
it's
good.
a mess, man. It's very faithful to React. It was crazy to go through it. And it's like tightly documented if you want to DIY it. It's the same way simple RSC exists. It's also meant to be like simple suspense. If you ever wondered what React suspense looks like to implement. So it's a relic. It exists. I'm glad we don't need it. I'm glad we found something better.
I love it, man. I love following the stuff that you're doing as well as you experiment with that. I know you said you had a hard cap in an hour, which we're a minute over, so I will wrap up the stream with everybody, but I will let you go. It's always good to see you, to hang out a little bit. Maybe we'll get to do something in person for the first time, hopefully sometime. But always a pleasure to have you on and get to learn more about the Astro ecosystem.
Yeah, always a pleasure. And thanks for having a rockstar week of here's all the frameworks and everything they're doing.
It's been a ton of fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Oh, sweet.
Well, I'll let you dip out. I'm gonna raid for everybody that's here. I'm gonna raid everybody over to InstaFluff, so I'll get that going. But everybody, thank you to Ben for being here. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us too. Oh, CD, I was gonna come back to your question, but like I said, Ben, I'll let you go, man. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate it.
Cool. See ya. CD said, any thoughts on how this will help the adoption of Astro? Having an interesting conversation in Astro Discord about starting a job board, and this feels tangential. CD, I don't know if you're referring to anything like specific about Astro, like adoption wise. I would think like the more my perspective is like the more they get like the addition of server action. So I think the more they get parity with some of the big dogs like Next.js, I think that's the one. Like if I were building an like a bigger application now, I might still do Next.js because they've done it longer and have kind of more things built in. My take has always been as Astro does those things, as I said, they're going to do them really, really, really well. So I think the more those types of features that look more feature complete with the big dogs like Next.js, I think you'll see more adoption. So yes, I think actions, server islands, I think those sort of things are compelling for people that have potentially been considering and weren't really maybe a little unsure in the past. So that's just my personal take. Yeah. Sweet. All right. I'm going to get ready to call it. I'm going to raid everybody over to InstaFluff. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. Good to see you all on Twitch, YouTube, and if you're listening on Twitter as well. But I will catch you all later. See ya.